Hello, and I hope you guys got as excited about the lunar eclipse that happened 2 nights ago as I did. This supposedly was the longest lunar eclipse that's supposed to happen this century. And what I want to do today is talk a little bit about that eclipse. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you about the three types of lunar eclipses. We have what's called the partial eclipse, and that's actually when it just touches the umbra, sort of like what this is. And we got to talk about the anatomy of an eclipse. We have the penumbra, which is the lighter part of the shadow. In other words, some of the sunlight gets into it, and then the closer you get to this line right here, the fewer amount of sun rays, because sun rays spread out when they touch a point. So the point that actually touches this part of the earth will spread out. And then we have the umbra, which is the inside, and this is the section that gets no sunlight whatsoever because the light can't bend into that section. So we have what's called the partial eclipse is when they touch this, the penumbral eclipse if it only touches the penumbra, and then we have the total eclipse if it actually gets in totality into the umbra. And um, this actually is the one that actually happened August 2017, so about a year ago. And I don't remember if this was visible for us or not. Chances are it was not. Here's an eclipse that actually will happen on January 21st, 2019, and we will actually get to see this eclipse because I'm located right here, and it looks like the greatest part of the eclipse is right in this line, so we're going to get a good chance to see this eclipse. And this will actually be a total eclipse, although not quite as good. If you take a look at the line, this one actually passes pretty high in the Earth's shadow. This one passes a little bit more towards the center, and if you can get one that actually happens right at the center, right through the center, that's the longest eclipse, and the one that actually happened 2 nights ago got really, really, really close. This is a map that actually shows you this eclipse, which will happen again on the 21st, 2019 of January. We'll have what's called a P1, a U1, a U2, a U3, a U4, and a P4, and right in between the U2 and the U3 we have what's called the greatest eclipse. So if you're located in this location right here, you're actually going to get from this point right there to that point right there, you're going to get the greatest eclipse viewpoint. You can see that most of the Earth gets to see this. It's about 75% of the planet gets to see lunar eclipse, where less than 1% of the planet gets to see a total solar eclipse. So this is a lunar eclipse that will happen January 21st, 2019. And this is the line that the moon took 2 nights ago. And I want to show you totality. The eclipse actually happening in the umbra lasted for an hour and almost 43 minutes. And for the partial eclipse going from penumbra to penumbra, the partial eclipse going from just touching the umbra to going out of the umbra is almost 4 hours, and from touching the penumbra to the penumbra, almost 6¼ hours. Okay, so what happens with P1? P1 actually is when the moon just touches the outside of the penumbra, and then it moves over to U1 when the moon touches the outside of the umbra, moves to U2 when the moon actually, the backside touches the umbra and it's actually in totality. Then the greatest is where the X is, which is right smack in the middle of the umbra. And then when it actually gets out there and touches the outside of the umbra again, that's called the U3. And when the backside gets out of the umbra, that's called the U4. And then when the moon actually moves completely out of the penumbra, in other words, this back part of the moon is touching this line, that's a P4. And they all get these terminologies unless it's going to be a penumbral eclipse, then it's just going to be a P1 and a P4. Why don't you have a P2 and a P3? I think the P2 is the same thing as a U2, and the same thing for U3 would be the P3, and then the P4, and they don't want to name the things two different, they don't want to name the locations two different things. And here's one that actually just moved through the penumbra, so this will be a penumbral eclipse. And this was actually in 2001, December. And then the last thing I want to do is just show you these things again. So the moon actually comes through, and if it goes in this line, we get no eclipse whatsoever. If it moves through this line, we get what's called the partial eclipse. And then we move through here, we can get a partial. This is actually saying it's a penumbral, but it actually is touching that umbra a little bit, so it's the partial eclipse. If it's just up here, it's an umbra eclipse. And then we move to the total eclipse if the whole moon is in there. And then we have the greatest total eclipse through the center, and it's a total eclipse in this moon because it's totally in the umbra. And then we have a partial if it actually just touches the umbra, and we have a penumbral if it misses it. And then this moon is a no eclipse. And most of the full moons move through no eclipse, just like most of the new moons move through no eclipse. But that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And I hope that explains the 3 types of eclipse, as well as why this eclipse lasted longer than any supposedly in this century. Thank you for stopping by. Adios.